unless you've been under a rock, law enforcement has taken a beating. And as we're watching the fallout from the Breonna Taylor case, I do have some concerns that was just an hors d'oeuvre, just a taster of what might be coming in Minnesota when the George Floyd jury starts to, the trial starts to get underway. And I see two outcomes in this. And in doing so, and in the midst of everything going on and how things are going in our society and our culture right now, the way that we're calling evil good and good evil, we're crying out for criminals to have more rights, and we're blaspheming evil, really, and taunting and destroying the hearts and minds of police officers. There's no doubt that the demonic realm is going to sit on top of what's coming, and it's going to have a great effect on what we do and what society does. I think it's safe to say that this trial that's coming is a huge trial. There was another trial that's very similar. I see similarities in it, and that's the trial of Jesus Christ. So let's take you through it. Let's go through it and see what we can glean out of it. We'll pick up in Luke chapter 22, verse 63. It says, "Now the men who held Jesus mocked him and beat him. And having blindfolded him, they struck him on the face and asked him, saying, 'Prophesy, who is the one who struck you?' And many other things they blasphemously spoke against him. As soon as it was day, the elders of the people spoke, both chief priests and scribes, came together and led him into their council, saying, 'If you are the Christ, tell us.' But he said to them, 'If I tell you, you will by no means believe. And if I ask you, you will by no means answer me or let me go. Hereafter the Son of Man will sit on the right hand of the power of God.' And then they all said, 'Are you then the Son of God?' And so he said to them, 'You rightly say that I am.' And they said, 'What further testimony do we need? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth.'" Now realize that Jesus has done nothing wrong. He is the only sinless man. And he has come under arrest, illegal arrest even. They're not supposed to arrest a man in the middle of the night or put him on trial in the middle of the night. They have to do it during the day, but they've done it here in an attempt to keep people from rioting. So they arrest him and they beat him and they mock him and they call him all kinds of names and whatever else, and Jesus puts up with it. What's he going to do? And then they bring him in here during the day and they put him on trial. And in that trial, they ask him, they investigate the case, right? We know that the arrestees put him in jail. Then the attorneys and the investigators looked into this case and they said, "Well, are you the Son of Man?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I'm the Son of God. Yeah, I'm not going to talk to you. You're not going to give me the right. You're not going to give me the freedoms that I deserve. You already have put me in this place, and so I'm not going to answer your questions. I guess I'll plead the fifth." And they say, "Well, okay, well, are you the Son of God?" He says, "I am." And they say, "Well, what else do I need to know? You've blasphemed. You have taken on God. No man can say that they are God but God, and you have blasphemed God, and therefore you are guilty." He's already been called guilty before he's even been put on trial. Chapter 23, verse 1 says, "Then the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, 'We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ the king.' And Pilate asked him, saying, 'Are you a king of the Jews?' And he answered him and said, 'It is as you say.' And so Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, 'I find no fault in this man.' But they were the more fierce, saying, 'He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place.'" So they find him guilty of whatever it is they think is wrong, and they bring him to Pilate, and then they lie. He stirs up the people. He doesn't pay taxes. He's creating injustice, he's creating issue, he's creating civil unrest, he's creating these things by saying he is the Son of God. Well, Pontius Pilate doesn't care about whether he's the Son of God. They don't believe in Christianity. They have a multi-theistic idea, right? Polytheism, more gods, lots of gods, gods everywhere. And so Pontius Pilate starts his investigation, his cross-examination. Are you the son? Are you a king? He said, yes, I am. He's like, well, I don't. He didn't lie to me there. I don't see anything wrong with him. But the mob starts to get fired up here. And the mob fires up that he is a problem. Now, this is where this situation becomes tense. Now, in the recent history of Rome, Pontius Pilate has come into Judea. And what he did was he took money from the church and he used that money to build an aqueduct in the city. And that really made the Jews angry because the money that belongs to God is God's money and it can't be used for something other than that. And so this ended this line of issues with the Jews, with Pontius Pilate holding the religion of the Jews as not respecting the religion. And so in this case, in this idea, they start to put together some social unrest. The social unrest isn't violent. It's just a peaceful protest. Well, Pontius Pilate puts armed men in the midst of this thing, and at his signal, those soldiers killed and maimed a lot of innocent people, a lot of people that were unarmed. He just complete destruction. And so now this gets back to Rome, and Rome says, whoa, holy cow, that's uncool. And so now Pontius Pilate is kind of floating on thin ice. He has already disrespected the religion, something that is against what Rome wanted. Rome is occupying the place, occupying the area, and they want the areas that they're occupying to be able to have their religious freedoms and so forth. Pontius Pilate has not done that. And so now he's standing on thin ice, and he knows that if he makes a mistake, that problems will occur. On the other side, Caiaphas, the Jewish head, knows that Jesus has said he is the Messiah. The Messiah was believed to be a military leader, and that military leader was going to come in and free them from Rome, the oppression of Rome. They didn't realize that Jesus came in to free people from sin. They believed it was Rome. And so here is Caiaphas saying, holy cow, he's going to come in, he's going to build up this group of people who are going to follow him. There's going to be great insurrection, there's going to be a rise up of revolt, and Rome is going to take away all our rights, and I can't let that happen. I have to defend my right, I am the head. I am the highest ranking person in the government of the Jewish nation right now because the prefect, Rome, is higher. And so Caiaphas says, I got to protect my lineage. I have to protect my religion. I have to protect my people. I have to protect my city. And so he says, he prophesies in the Bible. He says, one man needs to die so that many don't die. It was a prophecy that Jesus exactly came to die for many. But he was speaking the idea that if they put Jesus to death, that would kill the whole insurrection, and all of this civil unrest would die with it. So here you are. You have two leaders looking at each other of this same position, and they know that either way, they're both trying not to blink. And I don't see much different with this Minnesota issue. You have the mob who wants a certain outcome. You have a city council who wanted a certain outcome. You have a judge who is going to listen to evidence. I'm sure he's got a certain outcome, and the question really becomes this: do you look at the evidence that is existing, which doesn't seem like much, and do you listen to the Constitution of the United States and you have to acquit them because there's not evidence of murder, or do you go with what the mob says for the greater good? That's where we seemingly are going these days. With this cancel culture and all of this issue, we're looking at a decision that is, what is the best, what is good for this? We know that violence is going to break out if they're acquitted. We know that violence is going to break out. And what happens if they decide that they martyr these four guys and put them in jail for the good or the better good, right? And so the Constitution of the United States is out the window, and therefore we have no protection for the Constitution. I can see the problem here. Pontius Pilate knows that if he fails, he's going to lose his praetorship. Caiaphas knows that if he fails, there could be an uprising and he could lose his nation. And so there's some tension as he brings them to this. So Pontius Pilate, who is the one who is in control, has questioned Jesus, and Jesus said, he didn't find any fault in him. And this should be done, but it's not. Because Pontius Pilate decides here in the next section in verse 6, he's going to pass the buck. So it says, when Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked if the man was Galilean, and as soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. And now, when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracles done by him. And when he questioned him with many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. And then Herod, with the men of war, treated him with contempt and mocked him, arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him back to Pilate. That very day, Pilate and Herod became friends with each other, for previously they had been at enmity with each other. So all of a sudden, rulers of nations, rulers of jurisdictions are now trying to make decisions about this guy. Pilate says, well, this isn't my jurisdiction, it's his. I'll let him deal with it. Herod decides that he wants to turn this into some political statement, some political ploy. He wants to see Jesus do something amazing, but Jesus doesn't. So they treat him with contempt and they send him back to Pilate. Now Jesus is being passed around in a judicial kind of a merry-go-round here. Nobody wants to take charge of the decision that needs to be made. Instead, we're seeing what somebody's looking out for their own good. Everyone is looking out for their own good. And so verse 13 says, then Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, said to them, you have brought this man to me as one who misleads the people. And indeed, having examined him in your presence, I have found no fault in this man concerning those things of which you accuse him. So neither did Herod, for I sent him back to him. And indeed, nothing deserving of death has been done by him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. For it was necessary for him to release one at the feast. And they all cried out at once, saying, away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, who had been thrown into prison for a certain rebellion made in the city and for murder. And Pilate, therefore, wishing to release Jesus, again called out to them. But they shouted, saying, crucify him, crucify him. And then he said to them the third time, why? What evil has he done? I have found no reason for death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go. We see the problem here? Pontius Pilate has investigated the situation. The trial has come to him. He has looked to see if there is anything that he can put this guy to death for, and there's not. There's no evidence. And Pontius Pilate says that. I'll let him go. I'll punish him for something lesser, but I'm going to let him go. And they said, no, you need to crucify him. The mob wants to crucify an innocent man. And Pontius Pilate, who is the head of the area, has every right and every moral standing to make the right decision and release him. But what does he do? Verse 23, but they were insistent, demanding with loud voices that he be crucified, and the voices of these men and of the chief priests prevailed. And so Pilate gave sentence that it should be as it was requested. And he released to them the one they requested, who for rebellion and murder had been thrown into prison, but he delivered Jesus to their will. And now as they led him away, they laid hold of a certain man, Simon a Cyrenian, who was coming from the country, and on him they laid the cross that he might bear it after Jesus. And a great multitude of the people followed him, and women who also mourned and lamented him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For indeed the days are coming in which they will say, Blessed are the barren wombs that never bore, and breasts which never nursed. And then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things in the green wood, they will be done in the dry." And there were also two others, criminals, led with him to be put to death. And when they had come to the place called Calvary, there they crucified him. And the criminals, one on one right side and the other on the left. And Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." Pontius Pilate had the opportunity to release the Son of God, he was innocent. He was the only perfect man, the only man who'd never sinned, the only man who had never had a reason to be punished, yet at the mob's saying, and in the hope that for the greater good, and for the hope of not being thrown under the bus with Rome, and not to lose his job, he delivered them up to what they wanted. And he was put to death with no evidence. You see the picture? I fear that these men are going to be thrown under the bus too, for political gain, for the good of the nation, to squelch the violence and the marches and this Minnesota scripture, this Minnesota judgment that's coming up, this court case could be as big as the court case of Jesus Christ for our nation. So much is going to be determined. Will we still have a Constitution of the United States? Will we, as police officers, have the defense of the Constitution of the United States? Or will we lose our protection and our freedoms? And along with it, our freedom of religion and our freedom of speech, freedom to bear arms. We are going into a time period where really big things are going to happen, and it's going to define a nation. And that's what was happening here. Now, Jesus was delivered up for death. And he wasn't because there was evidence of it. It was very clear that Pilate found nothing wrong, and yet he delivered him up anyway. Now the encouraging part of all of this. Back in Acts later on, after God comes to, he is resurrected and he goes home. And after the church starts and the Holy Spirit comes down, Peter is talking. Peter is giving a sermon, and he saves thousands of people this day. But this is what he says. He says, "Men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested by God to you by miracles, wonders and signs which God did through him in your midst, as you yourselves also know. Him, being delivered by the determined purpose and foreknowledge of God, you have taken by lawless hands, have crucified and put to death, whom God raised up, having loosed the pains of death, because it was not possible that he should be held down by it." This gets into the idea that God has a plan and man has a decision. By God's foreknowledge and the belief that he knew what he needed to be done for sins, he delivered up his son for this crucifixion. He has shown them who he is. He has shown them by signs and wonders who he was. He made the proclamations. He did what he needed to do. And if you knew who he was, you believed in the Son of God. But wicked men had a decision, and that decision was to crucify him. You accept Jesus Christ. God gave you Jesus Christ. You accept him. So as of this court case, this judicial court case, God knew through foreknowledge the outcome. The outcome needed to be that Jesus needed to die. He needed to give his life up. But the men who have free will did it in a horrible way. I can't imagine what judgment's going to be. Jesus even said these guys, it's going to be far worse for these guys than anybody else. Those who have, even in Pontius Pilate, he says, well, are you a sinner? He's like, no, but the guys that delivered me up, they're sinners. Watch them. Look at them. Investigate them. Here's the point. In this coming court case, God's in control. God knows the parties who are going to be placed there. God knows who is going to be involved in it. God knows how it's going to come out. God knows how he's going to use it for his glory and for our betterment. Now, it may lead to horrible. The Bible says that in the end days, it's horrible. But the important part here is to know that God is working even through Minnesota, even through all of the garbage that's going on right now. God is using it to finish up there, just in an idea here, in Hebrews chapter 12. I love this part. It says, see that you do not refuse him who speaks. For if they did not escape who refused him who spoke on earth, much more shall we not escape if we turn away from him who speaks from heaven, whose voice then shook the earth. But now he has promised, saying, yet one more time, I shake not only the earth, but also heaven. Now this, yet once more, indicates the removal of those things that are being shaken, as of the things that are made, that the things which cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us have grace by which we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear, for our God is a consuming fire. What in your life is being shaken? What has God taken hold of? What things do you hold dear? For me, it was the NFL. I don't care about the NFL anymore. He shook that to the core. Is it your job? He's shaking it. Is it your freedom? He's shaking it. Is it your hope that the government is going to win in some way, that the right candidate is going to bring to you some sort of victory in this? Oh, he's shaking it. And just like God shook this trial with Jesus to bring him to his death, so that he could raise him up from the dead, sins would be paid for, his glory would be made, and you and I who have accepted him would then be part of the resurrection. As bad as it was, God glorified himself through his son Jesus Christ by dying and being resurrected for the glory of us all. No doubt that Minnesota is going to be very much the same way, although if you do not see biblically, you will not see the value in what's going to happen. But know that God is in control. He's always in control. And in that idea, we await the coming of his new kingdom, a kingdom that cannot be shaken, a kingdom that cannot be judged against, a kingdom that cannot be destroyed by rioters, a kingdom, a city whose maker and builder is God. Blessings.